get my audio.
I will do that after you've done the check of it, David.
Yeah, if I'll just share my screen now. Uh, so you should all see this PowerPoint or keynote presentation on my Macintosh, and I'll just uh, start it off there now. So, Brian, does that look okay?
That looks fine. And now I go
Okay,
next. Yeah.
okay, I'll
Over
take
to you, David.
Well, thank you. Uh, Years ago, a number of years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, I did a talk to the Menai Wildflower Group, and it was called Fungi, the Forgotten Kingdom, I think, because it is somewhat neglected by a lot of people. Uh, I'm a National Parks Association member, that's how I know Brian, and quite a few of the others here, but I'm also a member of the Sydney Fungal Studies Group, and we conduct a number of field activities in the national parks and council reserves, surveying what fungi is there and teaching people about this amazing kingdom. And I hope you'll agree with me by the end that it is quite an amazing kingdom. Now, why have I called it the magic of fungi? Because the kingdom is no longer forgotten. It took 130 years, but National Geographic, for the first time, have got fungi on the front cover. And the date up there is a bit obscure on mine, but it is April 2024. So this is the current issue. Fungi, and they say why it's just as important as flora and fauna. So that's good. Uh, Fungi are everywhere. They're on the roots of most plants, the stomachs of most animals, including us. Some can live underwater. They range in size from very, very tiny yeast up to huge 900 hectare mycelium, and I'll talk about what mycelium is later. One fungus in America and Oregon is supposed to be about 3.8 kilometers across, so the largest living organism on Earth. Okay, and estimated about 25% of the biomass. Uh, DNA analysis of soil. If you pick up soil anywhere, 1 teaspoon may contain several hundred species of fungi, and a few handfuls may contain 25,000 species of fungi. That's sort of fairly new, this information here. What are they? In the Victorian era, they'll call one of the cryptogams. That is, they're classified as plants that don't have seeds, they have spores. So they'll group with ferns and bryophytes, that's your mosses and liverworts, lichens and algae. So that's what fungi were thought to be, but they're not that. The fungi kingdom estimate, that's a very, very rubbery figure, 1.5 million. If you Google that, you'll get estimates, some up to about 11 million species, some much smaller. That's sort of a standard figure. There's a lot of different species of fungi, but not many have been described. 150,000 or so have been described. And of those, about 20% of mushrooms, the conventional mushrooms that we see, includes mushrooms and molds and a lot of other things, as you'll see in this kingdom. The word fungus is from Latin for mushroom, and the study of fungi is called mycology, and studied by a mycologist. If we look at a tree of life, a very basic one there, bacteria, branching off archaea, branching off, leaving the eukaryotes, the ones that are more complicated cells with a nucleus. The eukaryotes have a true nucleus of these organelles inside the cells. They've got different branches off as well, including cymoults, which I'll talk about a bit, the plants, fungi, and animals. And if you look at that, you can see that fungi come after plants branch off. So in other words, fungi are closer to animals than they are plants. And here is a breakdown. We've got animals break off to the right there, but then some of the major groups of fungi here, the zygomycota there, since this picture, have been divided, I think, into two other groups. But the main ones we'll look at are those left two. the basidiomycetes and the ascomycetes. They're the big ones that we see. Most of the others are fairly microscopic, ones that we don't see. And just to show you the variety of the kingdom here, just some of the beauty and some of the variety, a conventional mushroom, but beautiful colours. This fungus here with the spines. This one here, which looks like coral, perhaps. A fungus here. This mushroom has pores, it doesn't have gills. More of the variety, coral fungi, some clumps on the left, and some stinkhorns. Some fungi exude droplets of liquid, and just amazing diversity in this kingdom. All fungi. One of the reasons I became interested in the kingdom, I think, is because probably about 40 years ago, I went to a slideshow on fungi in Tasmania, and I was just astounded by the diversity there in this slideshow presentation, and that made me look for things, and I wanted to know more about them. There's these really strange organisms, puffballs. Of these things here, the left one, this blue sort of moldy stuff, which is actually penicillin. Penicillin mold there infecting, they might be animal scats. And on the right, a pin mold, a different mold, quite different, and probably infecting some fungi. I said before, fungi are close to animals than they are plants. No photosynthesis in fungi at all, and they can reproduce only asexually, sort of budding type reproduction, or asexually and sexually. That's very common, this alternation of generations. And just to illustrate there, some moldy bread from my larder, I think. The spores, as I said before, fungi have spores. That's why they were called, added to that cryptogam group originally by the Victorian naturalists. The spores germinate to produce long cylindrical cells called hyphae. These grow in a substrate, such as wood or dirt. The substrate, the substance the hyphae grow in. And opposite of what animals do, we have a stomach, and our stomach gives out enzymes that, and food in our stomach gets absorbed into our bloodstream further down the pipe. But fungi, it's the opposite way around. The hyphae exude enzymes, and anything nearby can get broken down and then absorbed by diffusion into the hyphae, and that could be fuel for its growth, etc. The hyphae form a larger mass called the mycelium. Hyphae are invisible to us. They're too small, microscopic. Mycelium look like tiny sort of white fibers in the leaf litter. The mycelium can, if conditions are right, produce this fruiting body that we see the mushroom. And that the purpose of the mushroom is the fruiting body. It's the equivalent to the flower of a plant. And there's a lot more mass underground in the tiny filaments than there is in the much larger fruiting body that you can see. And spores from the fruiting body, there's a lot of different mechanisms that spores can be released, but they're usually dispersed by the wind. The spores can be single cells or just a few cells. And unlike seeds, they don't have nutrients. They're much, much smaller and smaller typically than pollen, although their size range overlaps. Amazing diversity in shape and structures. And because they disperse in the wind there, they enhance rainfall. Water vapor condenses around spores, the same as it does really with pollen and dust and things. So they enhance rainfall. A lot of the stuff up in the air that gives us allergies and things is are fungal spores rather than pollen. So Uh, and the importance of the kingdom, they play an essential role as decomposers. Uh, if there weren't fungi around to do this decomposing, then we'd be walking through meters high logs piled up that haven't rotted away. So they break down complex organic materials into simple molecules that can be used by uh, plants again, etc. And the other importance is this mutualistic relationships, this ecology of fungi with other organisms, and not just plants. We call this mycorrhiza, combining roots, the mycorrhizal relationships that fungi have with plants. And between 80 and 90% of all plant species have mycorrhizal partners. And it benefits both the plant and the fungus. The huge surface area of the hyphae, all these threads, much smaller than root hairs, they can get more water and nutrients from the plant. And again, the fungus benefits, it gets some of the products of photosynthesis, some of the sugar and starches and other things. So beneficial. The mycorrhizal thing can take place. The fungus can surround the root like a sock, the root hair like a sock, or can penetrate the root cells, different mechanisms. And plants typically have these mycorrhizal relationships with up to 10 fungi. And this is important. In the 1990s, this concept of what we call the wood-wide web was developed, where the underground network of fungi that connect the roots of trees and other plants in a forest ecosystem, that underground network acts a bit like the internet. It connects up all these trees so they can share resources and potentially communicate. And by sharing resources, if a tree that is very old and some of the branches have fallen off, if the photosynthesis is not very good in that tree, then nutrients from other trees can spread via the fungal network to that tree and support it and keep it alive. And by communication, if part of the forest is being attacked by a particular insect pest, it can communicate that to the rest of the forest, and the rest of the trees can start producing chemicals which might stop that insect invasion. That's the idea of this wood wide web, and a lot of people have taken up this idea. But this is from the Conversation 2023. Isn't really what the way that trees and things work. Here's what the evidence says, and the conclusion of this article by scientists from England is that it's possibly a bit overstated and it needs a bit more research, although certainly some parts of it do seem to work. And now, not all plants are mycorrhizal, and one big group, the Proteaceae, aren't, which, when you think here, Banksias, Grevilleas, Hackias, Waratahs aren't mycorrhizal. But one group that is, and as bushwalkers, we often appreciate orchids, and I know some of the people this watching tonight appreciate the orchids, and they make up about 10% of plant species. And most orchids, not all, but most produce very, very small seeds. The seeds aren't viable by themselves. They need a fungal partner to germinate. The fungus has to provide the nutrients for that seed to germinate. And some orchids continue to be mycorrhizal right throughout their life cycle. Some are parasites on the fungus, although some can be parasites on plants as well. And chemicals released by the orchid control the fungus. So this amazing group of plants, orchids. The fungi part of it prefers old forests. So that's where you tend to find your orchids. They're often wood decomposers as well. And the fungal gnats can be pollinators. Now, they're not the only pollinators. A lot of orchids are pollinated by wasps and other insects, but a lot of pollinated by fungal gnats. And fungal gnats are little insects that at some stage of their life cycle often live under the gills of fungi. Now, the pollination mechanism can be sexual deception, where the parts of the orchid look like the female version of that insect, or wasp or something, such as pterostylus, where I think the pterostylus doesn't have that, doesn't look like the female. It emits chemicals, pheromones that the fungal gnat thinks there's a female there ready for mating. And some orchids use brood mimicry, such as the chromis, although there is some doubt about that, where the orchid itself looks like a good place for the fungal gnat to lay its eggs, and that can spread the pollen of the orchid. So lots of orchids need two other organisms for their symbiotic relationships, a fungus and a specific pollinator. And it's normally a specific pollinator, one pollinator species for each orchid. And there's some coryphus orchids there. This is interesting Caledonia species. I'm a partner with a genus called Serendipita. And Serendipita are quite amazing fungi. They do not have macroscopic fruiting bodies, so they're very hard to see. You cannot see the fruiting body. No big mushroom comes up. They're only discovered in the 1960s, serendipitously, I guess, because the spores look like little tiny worms, look like little nematodes. And they're present in Caledonia orchids around the base there. They help with the Caledonia orchid symbiotic relationships, but they're also, these serendipitous species are found on rotten logs and in the roots of grass and a lot of other things. And it's thought they could be used in agriculture. Why? Because they're mycorrhizal relationship. And a lot of these mycorrhizal things that could be useful in agriculture can't be cultured in agar plates or anything. So Serendipity can, and experiments, fairly recent experiments have shown that if Serendipity are introduced to certain plants, then the plants are more protected against drought resistance and also against pests, other pests or pathogens that could affect the plant. So it could increase the output in agriculture. And other things in the ecosystem fungi here, these coral fungi, orange coral fungi, you can see some little grey things on them. Perhaps if we zoom in a bit, they're little organisms called springtails, and there's a few other things as well. They're on the fungi, they're grazing on it. So a lot of organisms depend on these fungi. And it's possible that a lot of these organisms eat the spores, and the spores pass through the digestive system, and that's how they get spread. There's a slug, a native slug, a leopard slug, eating that rather old-looking fungus there. And another important part of the ecology is lichens, pioneer organisms that really turn rocks into soil, so very important. And they're not a single organism, but rather a mixture, two fungi or more living in association with an alga. So they've got a green part and fungal parts all together. And if you look at lichens, when you see the fruiting lichens fruiting, that's usually the fungal part there that's fruiting. Another interesting plant here that we saw on a fungi trip to Megalon Valley is this strange plant here. We're looking on the forest floor for fungi, and we saw this red thing. We thought, oh, that must be a mushroom, but no, it's a plant, little flower there, Thisbia megalongensis. Now, I'd actually read an article about it being discovered it was on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald a few weeks before. So I was prepared for something like this. I said, well, it could be that Thisbia thing. And when I looked up the paper, yes, it was. So they're called fairy lanterns. They're around the world, these plants. And there's quite a few species. There's probably 5 or 6 species in Australia. This one was only discovered a few years ago at Megalong Valley. And the whole plant grows completely underground, and it's only the flower that comes to the surface around this time of the year. And this little fairy lantern, and the plant doesn't have any leaves above the surface there, so it obviously depends on something else. It's a parasite, and it is a parasite with the fungus, and probably that flower there is probably pollinated by a fungal gnat too. Some bad things. They can cause infections in plants and animals. Dutch elm disease by this Phytophthora. Uh, but I've since found out that Phytophthora is now classed as a water mold, and that means it's not a true fungus, similar to fungi. But and there's another Phytophthora that's caused the potato blight, in places like the Irish potato famine. Uh, so they're water molds, similar organisms, but not a fungus. But there are a lot of problems caused by fungi, but in plants and animals. Any fungal infection to humans is hard to treat because they can't be treated with antibiotics. 300 million people suffer from fungal diseases each year, estimated kill more people than malaria. 12 species kill around 1.5 million people a year. These can be skin infections, mucus, infections to the mucous membranes, lung diseases, meningitis, and they can have similar symptoms to bacterial infections such as pneumonia. New varieties are emerging, infecting everything from crops to amphibians. They destroy about 1/3 of food crops each year, cause a loss of diversity. Amphibians, you've heard about probably that a lot of frogs are being infected by a certain type of fungus, but that also can affect bats and bees, different sorts of fungal infections. And some of this is due to the spores being spread by international travel, allows the spores to go to new locations, and also disruptions to natural habitat creates opportunities for fungi to evolve, become nasty. Some of the fungi that infects crops are smuts, which is the German word for dirt, apparently, which is the dark sooty ones, that sort of sooty powder on a plant. Rusts, so brown powder on plants, and these can infect things such as oats and corn. And ergot affects cereal grains, and there's some ergot on that paspalum there. This ergot fungus on the paspalum that was recorded by the Sydney Fungal Studies group at Sydney Olympic Park a number of years ago. And ergot has been blamed for witchcraft. If you eat cereal grains that have been infected with ergot, or even perhaps drink the milk of cows that have eaten ergot-infected grass, you can become the chemicals in ergot they can kill you, but they're also psychoactive and they can make you appear mad, which is thought perhaps might have led to some people being accused of witches, just because they might have had this temporary madness caused by eating cereals infected by this fungus. Economic importance of the fungi kingdom. Food, we eat a lot of mushrooms. Baking, brewing, winemaking, cheese making, industrial fermentation, alcohol use for different things in industry, and antibiotics, and also insecticides. With the food type thing, as well as the mushrooms you eat, a lot of the important food, if I'm just thinking of it, chocolate, coffee, cheese, wine, beer, all are all made with fermentation. So they all depend on a fungus. That's basically your 5 major food groups, I think, there. Fungi in our guts as well. And this is a fairly new article in New Scientist, 23 January 2024, looking after the fungi in your gut could be the key to better health. So we all know that the organisms that live in our intestines, our stomach and intestines, the microbiome, and there's a lot more cells from these bacteria in our guts than make up the cells of our bodies. Huge number of them. A lot of them are bacteria, but also fungi. And the fungi part is called the mycobiome for mycology. And they're mainly yeast-type fungi, and it is thought that they are essential for helping to fight disease, reducing inflammation and things like this. So this is fairly new research, and so it's probably, the microbiome has been a sort of a large area for research recently by health professionals. Aboriginal uses of fungi by the first Australians, it's not very well documented. It's certain they would have eaten some truffles, which are underground fungi, if anybody forms underground. And you think truffles, yeah, they're very expensive and they come from France and they're found by pigs. But also there's a lot of truffles in Australia. In fact, Australia has a lot more truffles, I think, than any other continent. Most of our truffles would be nice to eat, but animals do find them nice to eat. And a lot of animals like bandicoots dig up truffles and eat them. You see bandicoot makes a little hole. It's usually like a little conical hole going down 5, 10, 15 centimeters in the soil in our bush. You see a little conical hole there, usually at a bit of an angle. That's made by a bandicoot going after a truffle. And other animals like potoroos eat truffles as well. And it's likely that Aboriginals, they knew a vast amount about our natural resources. So it's likely they would have eaten native truffles. Native bread is one fungus that they did eat as well, that sort of falls off trees. It's a big bracket fungi that falls off trees. Medicinal uses as well. One that has been documented, not terribly well, as Trametes here, Coccinius, used to fight infections, and cosmetic uses as well, powder for puffballs to darken grey hair. And that's the Trametes coccinius, a very common fungi you see on longs and sticks in the bush. Very hardy, very robust, and lives there for a long, long time. Now, a bit about the kingdom as well. Fungi, the cells have a cell wall. Okay, you know in high school biology that plants have a cell wall, but the cell wall in fungi is different. It's very rarely made from cellulose. So they use chitin and other complex polysaccharides. And you think chitin, okay, high school biology, chitin is used for the shells of arthropods like crayfish and cockroaches and so on. That's their exoskeleton. But fungi use it as well. And the color pigments, the colors in the fungi come from the cell walls. Fungi can be unicellular, like yeasts, or multicellular, which is most fungi, or both in response to the environment. They have two stages, a vegetative stage and a reproductive stage. In the vegetative stage, I mentioned these threads, the hyphae, tangle of those, going about their business. They're all microscopic. The reproductive phase, the mass of hyphae form this mycelium, this larger white threads. Fungi need a moist environment, light or no light. Okay, so you know that sometimes professional mushroom growing took place in old abandoned railway tunnels. No light there. That's to stop weeds and things growing, I think. Most need oxygen. Some don't. The ones inside cattle rumen, they do not want the presence of oxygen. So they're in the cattle rumens there. They help it's important for the digestion of grass, this particular fungus, chytrid fungus. And yeast can have oxygen, but they can also use fermentation if there's no oxygen there. And fungi, substrates, soil, wood, fungi as well. Fungi can grow on fungi, animals. I should have possibly put plants as well, and dung. And we'll look at some examples. There's some fungi here growing on soil, a little cup on the left and coral on the right. These ones are growing on wood. These ones are growing on fungus. The one on the left is a pin mold that's infecting a mushroom, and the one on the right is a fungus that's growing on that mushroom there. These ones are growing on animals. You can't see the animal, it's underground, but the left-hand one is growing off a big a grub about the size of a human thumb, perhaps, that can be maybe 5 or 10 centimeters underground. And the one on the right there is also of a different sort of bug that's a bit smaller, a different sort of grub that's a bit smaller. And these are members of what we call cordyceps, born those later. And these ones are growing on dung, these particular fungi here. So they're different sorts of substrates. Some also like to grow off dead things, dead animals. I mentioned those big groups of fungi, and I said we'd only cover two of them really, the ascomycetes and the basidiomycetes, what we call ascos and basidiomycetes. These are the majority of known fungi. But if I look at my fungi guidebook, and Ian looks at his, it's only the last 30 or 40 pages of a 350-page book is devoted to ascomycetes. So it's the biggest part of the fungi kingdom of the ones that we, the big macro fungi we see, but a lot of them haven't been well catalogued, and a lot of them don't appear in books. They have this structure called an ascus, which is sort of like a little sac-like structure that contains spores, and it includes yeasts, truffles, morels, cups, and clubs in the ascomycetes. We'll see examples of those later. And these ones can break down cellulose. Okay, cellulose. Basidiomycetes, which make up most of the standard mushrooms we see, have basidia. So the ascomycetes have an ascus, these have basidia, which is a club-like structure that holds spores. So it's a bit like dividing the plant kingdom up into, our conifers or our flowering plants, I guess, different structures for dispersing seeds. Includes mushrooms, shelf fungi, the bracket fungi we see, snuts and rusts, and a lot more. Most edible fungi are in this group, not all. Morels with the other group, and they're very tasty. However, many are very toxic. And these ones don't break down cellulose so much, but they can break down lignin. Now, lignin is another compound in plants, and that's used to make plants rigid. So it's in trees. Trees are held together by lignin there. So these two things that are very tough, hard to break down, lignin and cellulose. Now, cellulose is in the in grass there, and think of the trouble that cows have to go to with all their stomachs to digest grass, and rabbits have to eat grass twice to digest it. Fungi can break down the cellulose, and this group of fungi can break down the lignin and break down things like longs. Basidiomycetes have alternation of generation, so the sexual stage, the asexual stage. They produce a fruiting body, usually the mushroom. And we'll have a look at some of these now. Just with a general sort of picture of a mushroom there. The top of it, the cap, we can call, although there's a more scientific names like for the cap and the gills, but they don't have to have gills, they can have pores. There's often, not always, a ring, and the stem part is called the stipe, and there's often, not always, this structure you see at ground level called a vulva. So that's just a generic sort of mushroom there. The cap can be covered in scales or fibrils, and different things. This Amanita mushrooms here, you can see a lot of these structures on the left and the right there. You can see the ring just under the cap. You can see the gills on the one on the left, the one on the right is a bit hidden by the cap. But you can see the vulva on the one on the right, that big round structure at the base at ground level there. That's where the fruiting body emerges from. So this is these are Amanita, very common species of mushrooms in lawns and things on footpath verges. Cordinarius, another common group of fungi, family of Cordinarius or genus Cordinarius, And these have what's called a cortina, which are the remains of a veil that, when the fungi has emerged from its vulva. Look at the one on the right, you can see a little brown ring just under the cap. That's the cortina. And the one on the left there are some brown streaks on the stipe. That's the remains of the veil. We call that a cortina, and this genus is called Cortinarius. And there you can see where the cortina comes from. There's the veil. They're just breaking off as these fungi. They would have emerged from the ground there, except they've been dug up. Another group here, entelomas, have pink-coloured spores. The colour of the spores is an aid to identify what group they're in. And entelomas overlap a lot of groups in terms of their appearance. They can be quite deceptive. They can go on wood, they can go on dirt, all different colours. My favourite of these wax caps, the family Hygrophoracea, and these ones, unlike a lot of fungi, these ones are thought to be parasites on moss or algae. They seem to grow often with moss and creek beds or other plants. So they don't need dead or decaying organic matter. And I like these ones because, being a fungi photographer, these ones have got amazing diversity and colours. So very beautiful. A lot of different colours. These tend to come out during the colder months of the fungi season, May, June, July. Some are very sort of shiny, covered in viscous stuff. They all have a waxy feel if you touch them, the wax caps. Russulas, another common group of fungi we see in our rainforests here around Sydney and our gullies. These ones have a similar sort of appearance, different colours. And these ones, if you do pull them up off the ground and snap the stipe, it's brittle, it snaps like chalk. And the russula there with a slight green colour. Mycena, like those other ones, the other ones they're growing on the ground. These grow on wood, logs or leaves, often smaller. Some fungi with pores now, boletes. So these ones grow on the ground. These boletes here, they have pores rather than gills. So the spores released by the pores there. Some other ones with pores, the bracket fungi on the left, and this one, which is a relative of Mycena, but it has pores. Pores seem to have evolved quite a few times. This is a bracket fungus here growing on a tree, and it has those droplets there. That's indicated it's probably growing on a living tree, and the droplets where it sort of maintains the right pressure. It's got to exude some droplets there, otherwise it might burst. Coral fungi looks a bit like coral in the coral reef, different colours, different types of coral fungi. When these sort of bright coral fungi appear, it indicates it's a good time to look for the wax caps as well, because they seem to like similar conditions, mosses and things. The resupinative fungi are sort of crushed and grow on wood. Puffballs, one that has a puff there on the right, and some with the holes there where the spores emerge from on the left. Some sort of burst open. An earth star, which is a variation really of a puffball, but it's like a banana peeling. The outer layer peels, and there's a sort of more conventional puffball inside. Bird's nest fungi, quite tiny. They're only a few millimeters across. A good place to look for these is in under wood chip type mulch. I know now that we're probably looking for asbestos there, but if you've got some wood chip type mulch around in a park or a garden, look for these tiny little things that look like bird's nests. And the spore mechanism here is that raindrops come down, they go in those little cups, those little balls there get thrown out, and the spores are sort of attached to those. Stinkhorns, and like the name says, they stink. Why do they stink? They attract flies, which are used in this case to disperse the spores. There's some there, and you can see the flies on them. All stinkhorns come out from this egg-like structure, and they just burst out, and they're much bigger than the egg, which sounds a bit surprising, but a lot of the stinkhorns are sort of like a wafer type thing. So it's all folded up inside the egg. And on this one, on the top of the stinkhorn, you can see this brown stuff that smells really bad, and the flies and other insects love it. Dogs might love it too, so it's probably not good for dogs to eat these things. This one here has this sort of little veil down there. And this one's classified as stinkhorns, but these are unusual. There's the egg-like structure, and there's one there that's burst out, and it forms this sort of basket or cage. And these can be about the size of a soccer ball, quite unusual. Spine, fungi that have spines, and again, the spines are the spore dispersal mechanism. Bracket fungi have pores. Trumpet fungi, unusual. These are hard to spot. This one is down at Bowler Creek in Royal National Park. Jelly fungi on logs. And some of these jelly fungi are actually eating another fungi that's in the wood. Some ascobiosets. These are these cups and clubs typically. And there you can see some clubs. They look a bit like some of the coral fungi, perhaps, but they're not. They're more club-like, and these little cups and discs. Little nails there, the green one. The one on the left is known as eyelash fungi because there's those little hairs around the discs. And these are larger ones here, morels on the top left. They're the ones that are good to eat, morels. We don't have many in Australia compared to photos you see with thousands of these coming up in America. Little cup there on the right. Bigger cups growing on wood with a little bit of fur on the outside. These are very tiny. Again, very tiny little things growing on wood. And the cordyceps that I mentioned earlier, the ones that grow off animals, also are in the ascobioset group. So these don't look like cups or little clubs. These are much bigger things, cordyceps. And if you touch one like that, you see that there. If you touch that, all these white little spores just spread out from there, so you know it's a fungal thing. And there's the host there dug up for this particular one. A little, I think, a beetle larva. Some can come off spiders. There's a lot of these that live on leaves, on little cordyceps type fungus that live on leaves, infecting the spiders that live in leaves. I found this one in the Lane Cove River and lifted it up and found a host there that it's come off. Two of the common ones there. The one on the left used to be called Cordyceps gunnii. It's changed its name to Drexmeria gunnii. And the one on the right used to be called Cordyceps robertsii, and it's now called Orpheocordyceps robertsii. So it's a bit like if people that know the orchids, there's a lot of name changes in fungi as well. So these are both found on the forest floor in places like Royal National Park in the rainforest. The cordyceps. And this is not a cordyceps, but this is a fungus that's infected a beetle, and it doesn't harm the beetle. The beetle found just in the blue bag, just wandering around. So it's a very unusual sort of fungus, this one here, different group. The cordyceps are interesting because they change the morphology of the grub. So the grub doesn't develop as normal. The fungus that's infected it releases chemicals that change its morphology, stops it turning into something that comes out of the ground and flies off. It gets bigger and bigger, and then when the fruiting body wants to appear, the fungus says, "Okay," to the grub, crawl up towards the surface a little bit. When it's about the right distance, the fungus appears. So they're quite amazing because they change the development of the caterpillar or their thing they're infecting. They could have medicinal uses, cordyceps type compounds, for example, killing cancer. I briefly touched on this zygomycota. This has been split into two groups. I said one of these five major groups in fungi, like the ascomycota, the basidiomycota. This is just a pin mold here, which you often see on the ground in a rainforest. Pin mold often infects food and things as well, like oranges. So it looks like little tiny pins there, a different group. And now I mentioned the slime molds as well. Slime molds are not fungus, they're not fungi, they're a separate kingdom, but they're really things that we look out for because we're used to studying looking for small things. So you often see these, and they have a lot of diversity as well. They're very interesting, and most of these are found worldwide, not restricted to say one country or continent. Different sorts of slime molds. So you tend to recognise these things. So, oh, that's a slime mold. Just looking at fungi in Australia now, briefly go through 250,000 species estimated, 5,000 mushrooms, about 15,000 have been described, which is not that many. Knowledge and distribution habits is poor. It's often difficult or impossible to tell if it's a native one or been introduced, and very few professional mycologists. Part of the problem. Now, many of the fungi here have been introduced with foreign soil, and some of our local fungi have been spread as far as Europe. One of those stinkhorns, that sea anemone type stinkhorn that you saw in the photo coming out of the egg, that was the very first fungus that was scientifically described in Australia. That has now spread to Europe, and marvelled at when it appears there. Some fungi near Sydney, seasonal in Sydney because of our climate, January to August, but really the season is now till July, and needs a good fall of steady rain, for example, 80 millimetres over a few days, rather than a very heavy storm. The rain that soaks in is better. And some species can appear all year round, such as stinkhorns. If there's a good fall of rain, they'll pop up in a park or something. Some species appear early in the season, some late. And just go to a few places, and some nice fungi around Sydney. Ferndale Park at Chatswood here, these wax caps appear here, and not many other places. These ones start off green and turn to pink. Some unusual coral fungi. These are asco things here, very large, maybe about the size of a 10-cent piece. These cups and discs. Lane Cove Bushland Park is a special reserve set aside because of its amazing fungal diversity. And two of the key members of the Sydney Fungal Studies Group, Graham Elmer Kenny, did a lot of study of the wax caps here, and it's really quite an amazing diversity of them that were discovered in this tiny area of Sydney, and it was earmarked to be part of a golf course, I think, at one stage. So it's been preserved now up in the Gore Hill area of Sydney, and this particular fungus here appears nowhere else in the world, so far as we know, and it's Hygroscopy lanecovensis. Some other fungi there. Lane Cove National Park, a good place for fungi as well. Walleye Creek, close to where I live. On one of our surveys of Walleye Creek, we came across this fungi here with a structure on the top of the cap. It's actually gills developing at the top of the cap, and it's a bit like people whose mothers took thalidomide and the wrong things develop. This nice fungus here growing normally, and there's one with this condition called rose comb. It was known about by fungi, professional fungi growers in Europe. If they grew their fungi where hydrocarbons like petrol have been stored, it can cause this. And this is evidence that the creek where this fungi is, petrol has probably washed down the creek with the roads up above and caused this damage to the DNA of the fungus here, so it's not growing properly. That's me there in a fairly old photo with my trusty macro lens and camera there. And I thought I'd just finish by looking at some of the fungi in Royal National Park, since this is the National Parks Association Southern Sydney branch, and they do a lot of walks in this area. And in particular, Bowler Creek, which is just off Lady Carrington Drive in Royal National Park. All along the creek, on the Wallamurra track and parts of the creek. In fact, really around the whole forest path is good for fungi and also good for orchids. And just to finish off with a lot of pretty pictures, some of the diversity of the fungi here that you get in this area. So these are boletes, mycena growing on a log, mycena type things here, growing on a leaf, tiny things, marasmius growing on a leaf, little tacks growing on a leaf. These are ones that come out early in the season, Cyptotrama aspirata. They come out fairly early, grow on logs. And you can see some baby ones there to the left of the main one. This is this one here with the pores. And all those little black things there are bugs eating it or eating the spores. This one has less bugs. And you can see a spider there as well. This one here, Omphalodus nidiformis, well known now, called the ghost mushroom because it glows in the dark. So people look out for that. Good one to photograph. The underside of these fungi here growing logs, whoops, too fast. Some russulas now. These russulas, they're the ones that snap like chalk. One growing on some dung. Entoloma, those wavy sort of gills given away here. Entelomas. These ones here, left is young, then it turns out the cap flattens out towards the one on the right. You can see some of the structures like the ring there on that one on the right. Trumpet fungi from Bowler Creek. They seem to regularly appear there at a certain place along the track. Hard to spot because they tend to blend in and be small and low down. Another type of fungi polypore there. Corals, lots of corals. Beautiful coral fungi. Different colours. When they're young and fresh, they're quite amazing to see. These ones are blue tipped. Puffballs. The star. This one here, which has got little spines developing. Malaria here, which infects living plants, living trees, and can kill them. And you don't want this one to infect your wooden house either. Wax caps there. It's a good place for wax cap. These are wax caps. Purple ones, red. There's probably 30 species of red wax caps around Sydney. Hard to tell them apart. Whereas there's only one species like this. And here, the purple tinge, that magenta tinge, is a diagnostic to what this is. It's called hygroscopy anomala variant Ianthin marginata. Beautiful shiny yellow one there with this viscid sort of. It's worth looking out for these things. I mentioned a lot of red ones. There's a lot of diagnostic things that you can do, how the gills are and how the cap goes. The one on the right has those sort of crenulations there, got a sort of a straight edge to the cap. This one I think is Hygroscopy bolonensis, named after Boulder Creek. And note the gills there go a fair way down the stipe. It's called the current gills. That's a diagnostic tool to what the fungus is. That's why if you want to know, want to get a fungus identified, photograph the gills if you can, as well as the side of the top. Whereas that gills are quite different there. They just go high up. These ones, again, have those sort of edge around the side there, little ripples. Again, very decurrent gills there going right down, called decurrent gills. So it's like a treasure hunt when you're in the rainforest, looking for these things. One characteristic of this one are little droplets. Just absolutely beautiful colors here. And all of these are from Boulder Creek in Wild National Park, all close by. This one here, which looks like a little brown mushroom. And by the way, little brown mushrooms are hard to identify because there's nothing that stands out. But this one is a wax cap, has that waxy feeling if you rip it out of the ground, which you shouldn't do. But it also has beautiful sort of lilac colored gills, Hygroscopy lilac amaletta. Some of these are actually protected by law. This one is Hygroscopy grisearia ramosa. It's a fairly rare, quite rare, and it's protected under New South Wales environmental legislation. So if you pull this one out of the ground, you could be liable, if you're caught, you could be liable to a fine of over $200,000. Now, it's unlikely that a single individual will be fined like that if they pull one up without knowing what it is, but a managing agency, for example, a council or national parks, if they didn't maintain the habitat, they could be accused of threatening an endangered species. However, I mentioned that this comes under New South Wales environmental legislation. If you look this up, New South Wales environmental legislation classifies fungi as plants. They're a bit behind still there. More wax caps. So I do like these wax caps. And these jelly fungi here, the spines are beautiful too on rotten logs. Their common name for these are cat's tongue. That rough sort of spines there. Or traditional jelly fungi, little globs, different shapes and things for the jellies. And one of these ones here growing on a living tree with the droplets. This one looks like a goblet. And more traditional bracket fungi here, beautiful colours. And here's a small stinkhorn here. And you can see it's coming from an egg with a few other eggs nearby. And you can see the sort of the wafer structure of these stinkhorns. They're often just hollow tubes. Little clumps there. These little clumps have little tiny hairs on them, which is a useful diagnostic if you want to know what this species is, because there are some that are shiny without hairs. This is one of many species known as dead man's fingers. Looks like little fingers coming out of a log. These green clumps, green tacks. These ones are known as jelly babies. Ascomycetes, little cups again, little cups. These can be quite big, several centimeters across, and a log can be covered in them. These are small, very small. And this is an unusual one I found at Bowler Creek one time, and it's actually a cordyceps, but it's not growing off an animal, it's growing off a truffle, apparently, this sort of cordyceps. So I wish I had dug this up to see that. Cordyceps capitata. And here is an insect there that's been infected by a mold. It's not a cordyceps, but it's a different sort of fungal infection. A lot of spiders and insects and things get infected. Whether the mold kills the insect or whether the mold has come after the insect's died, I don't know. This one was found at Bowler Creek by, uh, it was actually, I think, after that, might have been people in the NPA, and some people know Erden there, who'd come along, I think, on a fungal studies group trip. And Erden's wife picked up this frond of a cabbage palm, and there was this little tiny blue powder on it, which was this. And she said, "Is this a fungus?" And we looked at it under our hand lenses. Sure is. And it's well known. It occurs in different parts of the world, but very tiny, often overlooked. And Mycena lazulina, tiny blue lights, tiny little fungi, very hard to see. And it occurs on uh, the cabbage palm fronds after they're very rotten and in the rainforest and wet, and also on the large tree ferns, their fronds and things as well. And if you look at this at night, it's luminous, it's bioluminescent as well. And just to finish off some of the slime molds from Bowler Creek, and these require really, for a lot of the more powerful macro lens and focus stacking techniques and things. This one here is a larger one, usually 10 centimeters or more across, and it's known as either the scrambled egg slime mold or perhaps more commonly known as dog's vomit. So if you see something in the forest floor that looks like a dog has vomited there, it's probably this slime mold. And here's some structures of, this is a fairly old slime mold here, starting the spores have been dispersed. A younger one here looks like little icicles. The one on the left there looks like a little ball of chewing gum, but it's not a fungus, it's a slime mold. More slime molds here. And the last slide, identifying fungi, often difficult, often very difficult. You need to know what substrate it's on, what it's growing on, whether it's wood or soil. Can be difficult sometimes because I've seen some wax caps growing on rotten logs, but they're growing on really on where the moss is on the log. So the substrate's important. Photograph the gills or pores if possible. Look for other features and use field guides. But that first thing often difficult there is a story that if you have 3 mycologists and you give them a fungus to identify, they'll come up with 4 different answers. So can be difficult identifying these fruity bodies, which only appear for a very short time, made easier perhaps now by DNA analysis, this barcoding that's being done. But there are difficulties there because you have to know that the DNA database they're working out their results from is reliable, and a lot of them appear to be not very reliable. They seem to have sequenced the wrong species when they've set up their database. And there's my copy of this Field Guide to Australian Fungi by Bruce Fura, who died last year. He was a renowned amateur mycologist. He was a scientific photographer, and this guide still remains the best one for Australia, I think. Although there are some other guides, there's a very good guide to Tasmanian fungi, and that overlaps a lot with the fungi we have here in Sydney. There's also some good online resources too, if you hunt around. Some of those are linked on the Sydney, the Fungal Area Facebook page, and the website of the Sydney Fungal Studies Group. So that's it. I'll hand back over to Brian in case there are any questions.
Uh, there are already some questions, David. Thanks so much. Gary jumped in early on and asked about the law that allows you to check whether or not fungi are threatened or endangered classifications, and I suspect he was going to go on with the therefore under what legislation. You've partly covered it. I remember looking it up myself and finding out that fungi do squeeze in under plant legislation in some places, which will no doubt upset you when you are telling me that they're nothing to do with the plant kingdom. But can you add anything more to what you said earlier on?
No, I think I covered it earlier, unless Gary wants to follow it up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not many that are covered by that legislation, but like plants, there's a hefty fine involved if you threaten their habitat, really, as far as I can see.
Okay. Now, Vera has put up a photo. I don't know if you can see it in the chat. She wants to know have you found? Could you
in the chat?
In the chat there is she's uploaded a photo. Vera, where did you find it? I don't hear Vera. Vera, you've got to unmute.
I don't know if I can see the chat actually. Over here on the side. Yeah. Vera, yeah, that's that one. That's that polypore. That's what we call weeping polypore. A bit like the ones that I showed there with all the droplets. I'd have to have a good look. I think possibly a postea punctata, but I'm not an expert on polypores. So, but they're often grown in
Vera, do you want to email it to me and I'll flick it on to David? Hello, Vera. Vera looks half frozen there. Are you there, Vera?
She's not muted, but
I think yes. Okay. Daintree has put up a hyperlink for everybody who would like, and these will disappear later on. So click that if you wish. A guide put out by the LLSs. That's useful.
Yes, I have that guide here, which I can hold up. Whoops.
It disappears
Yes,
when you hold it up, David.
Yes. I've got a free copy, but you can actually hunt around for that. You can download a PDF version, or you can buy a slightly updated version for I think about $20 from local land services. There are some other guides too. Randwick Council has just released a guide to the fungi of the Randwick area, just a small booklet. That's available from the council office or as a free PDF.
David, I think I've seen you carry that field guide in with us on occasions. Am I right? Or maybe not that one. Maybe a local one.
The one I often carry is called the Fungi Flip, which is a Tasmanian resource. It's a big thing that folds out, concertina folds out, and it's got about 400 species on it. Done very well, just clear, good photos and their names. It doesn't have information about their habitat at all, whether they grow in wood or soil, but it's a good visual aid, and it's a very light thing. It's called the Fungi Flip. You can buy it in bookstores in Tasmania. It's often sold out because it's really good, and it costs like $12 or maybe $20 now. Highly recommended. And as part of a series, they've got a eucalypt flip down there, and even a poo flip for the scats for the native animals.
Now, Elaine, I must warn you, if you get excited by the fact that fungi and orchids go together, they also happen to love the same habitat as leeches.
As leeches, I know. I thought that.
For those of you who have never heard Elaine, don't get anywhere near her. There's a leech within 10 meters.
No Bowler Creek for me.
Any other questions?
Yes. Brian, how do people access the recording for this talk?
Ian.
Yeah, it's quite simple. It's being recorded now. Within the week, I'll send it probably on Friday to NPA.
Yeah.
There, a lady called Samantha will send it on to a tech expert who will convert it to YouTube. And what will happen is, those links are available. We'll publish it. and then you can see it on YouTube.
And that'll be publicly?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
YouTube. Yeah, so yeah.
Thanks.
So David's going to be another YouTube star.
Wow, and well deserved.
I'll just add that we're lucky in Australia to have what I think is the world's top fungi photographer. That's Steve Axford, who lives up in the Northern Rivers. And he started off by just as a retirement hobby, a bit like me, taking amazing photographs of his local fungi. And now he travels around the world to China and India, well, Tasmania, South America, photographing fungi for my professional mycologists there, just for their records, really. But so it's a very good recorder of fungi, recording them in their natural environment. But also he's got he used to use his spare bathroom, I think, but now he's got a shipping container on his property, and I think maybe he's gone to 2 shipping containers where he sets up logs and lots of water sprinkling over and things to keep it all moist, and cameras going there doing time lapses. And they're the time lapses you see appearing in the David Attenborough documentaries. So they're world-class photography. And Steve Axford, his partner, Catherine, have recently made a movie of fungi. So when that appears, that will be well worth looking at. I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds brilliant.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll say a few words. David, thank you for a magnificent presentation. It was just absolutely stunning. Just the diversity, every shot in focus. Just an amazing presentation, and I liked actually the background you actually used with the tonal variation for the slides. So thanks very much for that. With your book on Bruce Furer's 3rd edition or whatever it was, where have you got it from? I got mine from Royal Botanic Gardens. Where did you source yours from?
Yes, I can't remember where I bought mine, possibly from the Royal Botanic Gardens bookstore, which is quite good, the fungi. Dibix has it usually up in Sydney. There's a online fungi bookshop, part of what's called Fungi Map, which you can find online, Fungi Map, and they sell it by mail order. And I imagine it's probably available by the large mail order book companies like Amazon or Booktopia, etc.
And by the way, pronunciation sometimes is a step to rise to. I often thought it was the one we have near me is Rossella persanguina, but I know you pronounce the Rossella in a different manner. Is that how the?
Well, that's what I was told. Luschula.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one that hygroscopy, you think it might be spelled. It's spelled like hygroside, but my colleagues seem to pronounce it hygroscopy. Now, whether it is pronounced hygroscopy, or whether that's just something that if you pronounce it hygroscopy, you're a professional mycologist or something. I'm not really sure, but I don't think you'd be worried if you pronounce things a different way. Some people pronounce boletes and some people pronounce them boletes. So I don't know if there's any official pronunciation for these sort of made-up names from Latin or Greek.
So that sounds like mycologists are as crazy as botanists when it comes to pronunciation.
Oh yes, and also for changing things as well.
I think David, your slideshow is just so comprehensive. I think every one of us should really get the YouTube and go through it slowly. Some of those photos were just absolutely stunning, and I think to do it justice, you really got to probably do it in a number of sessions. So I just like to say thanks very much, and I hope everyone gets to see the video, the YouTube clip, and does what I just recommended.
I'll just my final words will be that please, if you like this kingdom, and it is amazing, just be prepared to get down on your hands and knees and look in that forest litter, look in the leaf litter for these amazing things there. And quite often, some of that fungi that appear in the photos, I've only seen because I've got down to photograph something big and obvious, and then when I'm down on the ground, everything's a bit closer. Oh, what's this? Oh, this is really strange. Oh, there's a stinkhorn over here. So get down.
Has Gary got a question?
Gary and Elizabeth both had either their hands up or they were clapping. I wasn't quite sure which. Gary.
unmute, Gary.
I'm just clapping.
Clapping. I thought it was, and so is Liz. Okay.
Well, thanks
Right.
for the yeah, thanks again, David, for the, what was you describe it when you go to Bowler Creek, a treasure hunt. I think we'll all go treasure hunting.
Yeah,
If you
look,
don't know what
I
to
have walked in Bowler Creek with David. David and the mycologists are about as slow when they've got their nose to the scent, so to speak, as a grasslands expert can be when they're looking at and trying to separate every grass in a square meter. We will be doing a field trip or two, I'm sure, somewhere down there in April, May, especially if it's raining. And I'm sure if we wear the right clothing, we might even fend off the leeches, Elaine, if you would like to come along. In any case, by the time we get to June, July, lots of the green hood orchids will be. And I'm sure we can bring in a few other species like the Achianthus as well.
Gary's
The
now
Sydney
raised
Fungal
his
Studies Group also has a series of field activities. The next one is this coming Saturday at Mount Wilson, at the Waterfall Reserve at Mount Wilson. And roughly every 2 weeks now in the fungi season, we have a field activity, and visitors are welcome on those. Some of them are up in the Blue Mountains, some of them are in, they have one in the Hawkesbury River, Mill Creek, and others at Bowler Creek, Walleye Creek Regional Park, one at Ferndale Park at Chatswood. So people are welcome to come along with those. So Google Sydney Fungal Studies Group Inc. and look for activities, and there'll be details there.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think Gary does have a question this time.
Yeah, just a final question, Dave. What did the mushroom say to the toadstool?
Oh,
Gary.
Oh, no.
Gary.
You're a fun guy.
You're a fun guy. That's it. Well done.
And just for gender
Thank you,
equity,
David.
Droll, Gary, very droll.
you can also be a fun gal.
Okay. Now, before I formally thank David, Nick, I'm going to add an ad for the next talk. It'll be me. We're going to be looking at Kosciuszko, and I'll throw in the Monero as well, in because I love Monero and the Kosciuszko in summer. No snowy stuff, just lots and lots of wildflowers and a few management issues. So it'll be a touch more political than David's was tonight. And if Michael finally succeeds in working out how to do a presentation, you're in for a real treat in May. I don't know if you've ever been on Facebook to Michael Doe's page, DOE, but if you haven't, do so and check out his spider photography. If you think David's good with his photography, you'll be blown apart when you see his stuff into the funny world of those little gorgeous things called spiders. The Southern Sydney branch have got talks right through until July now. I think we might even have the August one lined up, and there'll be more to come right through until November this year. And thank you all for coming. I think there were up to 44 screens are operating, and I know a few of those were multiples. But finally, David, thank you very much. I totally appreciate whenever you're out with me and what you can teach me. I totally appreciate your own work, and I think everybody here has enjoyed it immensely. Congratulations.
Well done. Well done.
And that,
Thanks, David.
and that, folks, will be it. And I think Ian can turn us all off.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming.
See you
Cheers,
all.
cheers everyone.
Okay.
Uh,
Thank you. Thank you very much.